This is Chris Miles here, cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. I've got here joining us Lane Kawaoka here from Simple Passive Cash Flow. Definitely check out his podcast, Simple Passive Cash Flow. Got a great deal type stuff you can follow as well. He's got lots of investments. He's a syndicator. Been doing real estate now for over the last decade. Moved from single family all the way to now multifamily stuff all over the country. And so want to be able to interview him really quickly because a lot of the questions that I get asked of me is, okay, Chris, like we know how you leverage infinite banking, but how do other people use it? Like, tell us how investors really use it, even though it's not rocket science. It really is not. But I guess you guys really want to know, like, what is that difference? Like, what are some examples? And so I brought Lane on here because Lane's been a client of mine for the last several years. He's got a couple policies already, and he's been leveraging this. So, Lane, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I've kind of got a couple of ways I use it. I mean, I'm a syndicator, so I kind of use this as a liquidity source. But when I first started to use it, I think we got this idea, maybe like 5 years ago now, right? 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
I made my first policy. I think it was like 50 grand a year. And for like, I think 6 or 7 years, I think what it was. So I stuffed money in there, you overfund it. And then you take it all out, which for a lot of people is, they're uncomfortable with that, right? Because they're like, oh, don't I have like an interest payment? And then the sophisticated investors are like, yeah. And so just like kind of how some people are like, when they hear about alternative investments, they go get a HELOC in their primary residence to tap that lazy equity.
That's right.
And in the beginning, you probably were a little uncomfortable having to pay back the bank these interest payments, and you may not have cash flow coming in from those investments. Sometimes it takes a little while for it to get going, but it's a mindset thing, right? Like, you will be making X amount a higher rate of return later on. You just have to wait through that uncomfortable period when it kind of gets going. But yeah, you got to feed the beast. You have to pay your interest payments on your HELOC, or in this case, your infinite banking. And what we tell people is like, just, hey man, just take out an extra $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, and pay those interest payments out of that, which, coming out hearing myself talk, like that is kind of everything that they tell you not to do, right? Normal financial advice. But yeah, so what that year I loaded it with 15. I think we backdated it based on my birthday. So I was able to throw in 100 grand, put in another 50 grand the next year. So I had $150,000 of dry powder. And then that was when my investing really started to pick up. Around 2018, I got into a lot of deals as a passive investor. And I don't have that much cash on hand. No good investor does. So what did I do? I reached into my infinite banking, grabbed 50 grand and went into that second deal. And then there's a third deal that came out nicely, used the infinite banking, and I dipped out of there. And then, so I got into all the deals I wanted, and there was kind of a low time. I think it was kind of the end of the year when things are a little bit more quiet. I paid back, I made some money, another deal cashed out. I sold a rental property and I replenished my infinite banking, and I got up to full battery charged in a way, back up to the 150. And that's a good example of how, and I've done that a few times through the years where I've taken a loan and I've paid it back. And later on, as it becoming more of a syndicator, sometimes getting through the pandemic, I had to put in some money personally as a general partner to feed the beast, right? Because we're not going to have a capital call. That just ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So me as a general partner, I've had to take out a couple $100,000 out of my policy, and now I just make it a good practice of keeping that dry powder on hand. So where most people are, they're just salary guys. They work day jobs. They're not entrepreneurs, right? They don't need this emergency cash overlay. They might just take out all their infinite banking money and put it into deals. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, or somebody like myself, a real estate syndicator who may need access to $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 at a whim, that's where you use the infinite banking in this different way as that dry powder source. So two ways of using the same tool.
That's really smart because, like you said, you can always leverage it and you can go do deals and get that double dip effect. But what you're even doing is saying, hey, I got to have some dry powder on the side anyways. And if I'm going to keep it in the bank, which is exposed to creditors and lawsuits, you make nothing percent and then you get taxed on it. You're saying, hey, let's put it in a place where it is protected from creditors and lawsuits. They can't touch that money. It also is growing tax free and it's growing a much better return than what you get in the bank, right? So it's That's a great place. That's a smart way to do it.
So sometimes the banks are a little tricky because, they want to see liquidity sources for me,
Mhm.
or if you're buying rental properties, they might want cash reserves.
That's right.
Sometimes they count your infinite banking, your whole life cash value as liquidity. And if they don't, if they're kind of bureaucratic sticklers, you just take it out and put it in your bank account. Say
Right.
done.
And they say, where's your funding source? Like from the account they wouldn't count. So here it is. It's
Yeah,
real.
here it is, buddy. And then they kind of go in their little pencils and they check their box because that's what they were told to do.
Yep. Exactly. And you're not always, even when you do borrow it, you're not always paying it back on a monthly basis like somebody with a HELOC. You're probably paying it back as the money comes in, correct?
Yeah, and part of it is just kind of faith and that the system works. Like you
Yeah.
don't really need to pay it back, right? The whole point is your money is working somewhere else. Now, if you're like most people in this world, what you get in the policy 4 or 5%, that's better than what some people are getting. But if you're a sophisticated investor, I mean, you should be able to make double, triple that outside.
Yeah.
That's why you take it out of the policy and get it to work.
Right.
But I get it, right? It's a mindset thing. Like, I mean, I was there, we were all there at one time where you're kind of brainwashed to think like, oh my goodness, I have to pay back this payment.
Mhm.
But do what the banks do what governments do. They borrow at an X amount to make a higher percentage elsewhere, and they use inflation on their side.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. The cool thing is, depending on when you're watching this and depending on what the feds do with the rates, we got loans as low as 3% you can leverage on life insurance loans. So it's pretty awesome. Just the opportunity that's out there now, considering the high inflation we have. It's kind of that rare, small moment of time that we've got right now.
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, the infinite banking is just a tool, right? I mean, you can use the tool in different ways, and
Mhm.
there's a variety of ways of using this tool. Um, it's not for everybody, but it is for most people, especially if you're kind of a good investor and you're kind of leveraging your money elsewhere.
Yeah. Great point. Well, Lane, I appreciate answering these questions, and I know a lot of people will get a lot of benefit getting your perspective on this. So, really appreciate your time, and everybody, again, go check out Lane's stuff. Go to simplepassivecashflow.com, which you can see right here on the screen. You can also go to Simple Passive Cash Flow's podcast and be able to check out a lot of the education he teaches there too. So be sure to check him out. And of course, if you got a question on the infinite banking side, reach out to us at moneyripples.com.